Adesanya reacts to Islam Makhachev vs Volkanovski, UFC 284. Alexander Volkanovski vs Islam Makhachev was one of the most intense matches we've seen in a long time. But the final results seem to have many people unhappy. One of those people being the legendary Israel Adesanya. Izzy was alongside with Volkanovski for majority of his training camp, and he was at UFC 284 in support of Volk. The match was different than everyone expected it to be, and to everyone's surprise, it lasted all 5 rounds. According to his performance, everyone thought Volkanovski actually won the match, but when Islam Makhachev's hand was raised, many people were disappointed. Israel Adesanya took to his social media to call out the UFC for this bad decision, and his reaction is actually hilarious to see. UFC 284 was a historical event and was actually one of the most successful UFC events that ever took place in Australia. If you watched this card, then you probably noticed that there were many Australian martial artists in the card, and it had the fans going wild. But when the main event came around, the energy shifted. Everyone in the arena was going for Volkanovski, and one of the main people was Israel Adesanya. And his reaction is actually hilarious to see. UFC 284 was a historical event and was actually one of the most successful UFC events that ever took place in Australia. If you watched this card, then you probably noticed that there were many Australian martial artists in the card, and it had the fans going wild. But when the main event came around, the energy shifted. Everyone in the arena was going for Volkanovski, and one of the main people was Israel Adesanya. Izzy was there in support of Volkanovski, and you can tell by his reaction that he actually thinks Volk won the match. I'm guessing this calls for a rematch, but the UFC has yet to say anything about that. According to everyone's reactions about Islam Makhachev winning, it seems like there will most definitely be a rematch in due time. Israel Adesanya seems to be super unhappy about the decision between Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, and his reaction is starting to go viral all over the internet. It's cool to see Israel Adesanya stand up for his friend, but there's more to this reaction than that. Adesanya claims he re-watched the match replay multiple times and is positive that his friend Alexander Volkanovski won. It's interesting because so many more big names agree with Adesanya and think Volk won the match. Joe Rogan also had a lot to say about this match. There's obviously a lot to get into with all that's going on in the UFC, but today we'll mainly be sticking to Israel Adesanya's reaction to Makhachev vs Volkanovski. It's interesting to hear what Adesanya has to say, and personally I respect his opinion. Like I said, there's a lot to get into, so be sure to stick around and watch this video until the end as we get into things one detail at a time. Trust me when I say you won't want to miss a thing. Thanks for stopping by today and visiting us at Warrior Report. We post daily UFC updates and news that you really should know about if you're a fan. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more content like this, leave a like, and comment keyword Adesanya to enter a chance at winning our brand new iPhone giveaway. One lucky viewer is picked at the end of each month. Now, let's jump into this video and take a closer look at Israel Adesanya reacts to Makhachev vs Volkanovski. Islam Makhachev vs Volkanovski's match at UFC 284 was one of the best matches we've received in a long time. I must admit, I totally thought this match would be one to end pretty early on, but to everyone's surprise it was the complete opposite. These guys went until the very end of the 5th round and fought with their hearts. This is the first time Islam Makhachev has ever been in a 5th round. None of his opponents in the past has ever survived until the 5th round. But you gotta remember, this isn't a regular opponent. Alexander Volkanovski is an animal. The man is literally still considered the pound-for-pound best in the UFC, even after his loss against Islam Makhachev. This match showed the UFC how strong Alexander Volkanovski actually is, literally moving up a weight class to go up against Islam Makhachev, then literally doing such a great job that most people argue he won. It's actually crazy to see, and nobody actually thought this is how the match would play out. All I know is the UFC is at a crazy place with all the so-called bad calls. First, with Paddy Pimblett's last match, and now with Volkanovski's call. It was odd to everyone how even Joe Rogan thought these matches ended weird, and a lot of people aren't happy. One of those people turns out to be Israel Adesanya. Adesanya was training with Volk for most of his training camp, and is aggravated with the final decision of Volkanovski's match. It's said that Islam won because he had much more control time than Volk did, which makes sense. But if you watch this match and how it ended with the ground and pound, you'd probably think Volk won as well.